Hello, good day to everyone. Welcome to our Introduction to Linguistics class under the supervision of Dr. Ronaldo F. Pascual. My name is Jordan A. Aguilar and I will be your presenter for today. My topics are about applied linguistics and computational linguistics. As we have discussed from our previous lessons, we learned that linguistics is a scientific study of language and its structure, that it involves the analysis of language form, language meaning, and language context. So today, we will be learning how does a language can be acquired through the help of strategies and understanding other disciplines, and how advanced technologies like computers aid in learning and acquiring a language. Now, let us first tackle applied linguistics. Learning a language is not a piece of cake. Of course, there will be lots of problems in learning a language and acquiring a language. Even if our mother tongue has gone through a lot and complex process before we fully learned it and acquired it. Remember that in our language development class, way back in our college days, it is during prenatal period when babies are still inside their mother's womb, they are already starting to learn their mother tongue through voice recognition and perceiving sounds from the outside interaction of their parents and other people around them, until they were able to say their first words at around 1 year old to 2 years old. It is surely a long and complex process to form the language and represent it to the minds of the learners or of the babies. That is why applied linguistics is called for, because it helps to identify the problems in acquiring and learning a language. Then we can investigate the cause and reasons of the problems so we can offer solutions to help the learners to learn and acquire the language. For instance, we cannot expect a baby or a toddler to talk long and understandable sentences already. He or she must have gone a long and complex process starting from prenatal period and babyhood. Perhaps we have to help them first to produce sounds when they are cooing or bubbling until they are able to say their first words such as dada or mama, meaning we are applying our knowledge about phonetics and phonology in helping them to produce sounds. Therefore, when we say applied linguistics, we are applying our knowledge in linguistics for us to be able to help our learners to learn and acquire a language. Another example, we have a student who can express his ideas in English, but he has lapses in grammar. Remember, grammar is also important for us to be able to convey our messages clearly. As teachers, we can help him learn the grammar for him to be able to gain the skill of having a good command in English. Therefore, as applied linguistics per se, we used our knowledge about syntax to help the learners to learn the grammar. Applied linguistics is also an interdisciplinary approach, meaning in helping our learners to learn and acquire their target language, sometimes we cannot do away with only one method, but we can also use different strategies and approaches, or even combine them for a more effective learning and acquiring. For example, you have a new friend who is a Korean nationality. Of course, the problem is obviously both your languages because communication will fail. Perhaps to be understood by your Korean friend, you have to help him how to use the English language. First, you might want to teach him basic greetings by demonstrating or showing how to do it, like waving your hands. Then you can explain its meaning that when someone waves his hands like this, it means annyeong in Korean and hello in English. And you can tell him to remember or memorize the word hello, meaning we used many approaches all at the same time. We used three techniques actually. First, demonstrating how to do it. Second, explaining its meaning. And lastly, memorizing the word. Memorizing the word alone also talks about semantics. For applied linguistics, the central question is, How far can existing models of description in linguistics be used to resolve the practical problems of language use we are concerned with? Well, as long as we can utilize these linguistic knowledges that we have in helping our students in the attainment of their learning goals in language, we are exercising applied linguistics. According to Corder 1974, applied linguistics is the utilization of the knowledge about the nature of language achieved by linguistic research for the improvement of the efficiency of some practical task in which language is a central component. Meaning, in order for us to attain our goal or task, or for us to ensure the efficiency of our work, we have to have a good command in language. And our good skill in using the language was because of the linguistics researches, the disciplines, and the strategies that our teachers used or utilized when they were helping us to learn the language. For this one, let us have a brief comparison about linguistics and applied linguistics. We know that linguistics is a scientific study of language and what is language and how it is represented in the mind. In linguistics, we talk how the words are being produced in phonetics and phonology because we already have idea in our mind or it is already represented in our mind that the sound of B is B and S is S. We also know how words are being formed because our mind already have knowledge about morphology. Our mind is already familiar with the meaning of the words because of semantics and pragmatics. So we can use it in meaningful sentences with correct grammar, and that is syntax. Whereas, in applied linguistics, it is oriented with the solutions to linguistic problems using our knowledge in linguistics. It puts linguistic theories into practice in areas such as foreign language teaching, in which the language is the problem itself, speech therapy, in which learners have incapability in producing sounds because their tools in producing the sounds may be or may have a problem, like having short or long tongue, deformed teeth, and others. Here's another comprehensive definition of applied linguistics. Applied linguistics identifies the problems and the causes and reasons behind it. When we already know the nature of the problems, why our students find hard to learn about a specific language task, we will be able to help them learn the language because we have knowledges how to apply linguistic methodologies. After doing our part as teachers, they will be able to do it by themselves. Because according to Strivens 1992, whenever knowledge is used to solve a basic language-related problem, one may say that applied linguistics is being practiced. Therefore, applied linguistics comes between theory and practice. That, for us to be able to practice the language well, applied linguistics helps linguistic theories to be reflected in our speech. To cap it all, applied linguistics has something to do with what we know about the language and how do we utilize what we know for us to learn it and how to use it. Remember that the primary concern of applied linguistics has been about the second language acquisition theory because our first language or our mother tongue may be of great help in learning and acquiring a second language, and about second language pedagogy because it requires the teacher to be knowledgeable how he will help his students in learning and acquiring the language using different methodologies and pedagogy, and its interrelationship between the two. Here are some of the problems related to language that we might to consider. Number 1. Language learning refers to how much do we know about the nature of our learners in terms of their ability to learn the language. Number 2. Language teaching refers to how much do we know about teaching strategies and methodologies and using it in the practice of our profession as teachers. Number 3. Refers to how much do our learners know already about their target language. Number 4. Language contact. The more we are close to our students, They tend to learn more because we are there to support their learnings and we can provide immediate feedback about their language performance. The lesser the contact we have with our students, they gain lesser knowledge about the language because there would be less observation about their learnings, less chance of correcting them, and other reasons. Number 5. Language policy and planning refers to the program being implemented to the learners. Remember, one policy may not applicable to all. So teachers' intervention is very crucial in identifying who are the learners who cannot follow the program. Then he shall apply applied linguistics to help these particular learners. Number 6. Language assessment refers to the language assessment tools appropriate to the students in connection to how did the teacher teach the students. Are these assessment tools have gone through evaluations to really test the students' understandings and learnings about the language? Number 7. Language cues refers to the language itself as the problem, maybe because the language used by the teacher is not very familiar for the students or the level of the language used by the teachers is not very suited to the level of the students. Number 8. Language and technology. Many of us do not know how to maximize the use of our technology. Example, like what we are experiencing today, we are in the pandemic period, so we cannot do away with the learning and teaching from home, where language learning may be compromised because communication fails due to the internet issues like lagging issues. And some do not know how to manipulate computers. So, some resorted to only choose modular learning, especially in most of the public schools. Number 9. Translation and interpretation. Remember what we learned in semantics and pragmatics. A word or a sentence may have two or more meanings that may lead to misinterpretation that may also result to miscommunication. And lastly, number 10, language pathology refers to the problems may be biological that hinders the learners to speak rightly, like being tongue-tied, children with short or long tongue. Some do not know how to take turns in a conversation, stuttering. Some talk loud naturally as if they are shouting. Frequent use of and others. Before the 20th century, applied linguistics has been a practice already, but it was only in the beginning of 20th century when language teaching and learning became as a profession. As time progressed, researches about language learning and teaching also improved. The foundation of contemporary language teaching was developed during the early part of the 20th century as applied linguistics and others sought to develop principles and procedures for the design of teaching methods and materials, drawing on the developing fields of linguistics and psychology to support a succession of proposals for the more effective and theoretically sound teaching methods. From this slide, let me discuss the approaches that people used during the 20th century to teach the English language, in which we can also apply these approaches to our teaching career in present, but of course with consideration to the different types of our learners. Remember, one approach may not fit all. Let us first have the grammar translation method. Today, English is the world's most widely studied foreign language. When you go to other countries, even if English is not their national language, still English is used when you talk to its local people. 500 years ago, Latin was the most widely studied language because it was the dominant language in education, religion, commerce, and in government in the Western countries. However, the political changes in Europe gave way to French, Italian, and English to the limelight of importance. Thus, Latin was displaced as a language of spoken and written communication. Latin was diminished from a living language to just a mere subject in school curricula. Children in grammar school were given rigorous introduction to Latin grammar which was taught only through rote learning of grammar rules. Meaning, when we say rote learning, the children were only taught Latin by just merely memorizing. Here are the principles or the characteristics of grammar translation method. The goal of the foreign language study is to learn a language in order to read its literature or in order to benefit from the mental discipline and intellectual development. Meaning, grammar translation method approaches language study through a detailed analysis of its grammar rules, followed by translating sentences and texts into the target language. This view consists of merely memorizing rules and facts to understand the morphology and syntax. Hence, grammar is taught deductively by the presentation of rules then practiced through translation exercises. In the grammar translation method, the first language is maintained because it is used as the learner's reference in the acquisition of the second language. Example, in English, we have the SLVC pattern that will serve as our guide to make a simple and comprehensible sentence. That the subject must come first before linking verb, followed by a word that complements the subject or a word that tells something about the subject. The girl is pretty. The girl is the subject, followed by a linking verb is, then the word pretty that tells something about the girl. So, when a learner wants to translate his language to English, he will just follow the SLVC pattern. So, from the sentence, maganda ang babae, he has to recognize which one is his subject, the verb, and complement. Therefore, his sentence would be, ang babae ay maganda. Then, translating it to English, the sentence would now be, the girl is pretty. Meaning, in grammar translation method, the sentence is the basic unit of teaching and language practice. The lesson is devoted to translating sentences into target language following its grammar with a focus on that sentence. Again, the student's native language is the medium of instruction. It is used to explain new items and to enable comparisons to be made between the foreign language and the student's native language. In grammar translation method, reading and writing are the major focus, with little or no systematic attention is paid to listening and speaking. Reading the text, memorizing the rules of grammar, and writing for translation are the focus of the grammar translation method. The proponents of this approach before believe that in this way, they will gain knowledge about grammar from the writers who wrote the books. So accuracy is important and emphasized. And students are expected to gain high standards in translation. If grammar translation method focuses on the syntax, in this next approach, which is the reform movement, phonology and phonetics are given of much more emphasis because the target language was primarily on spoken language and language teaching practice reflected on the oral-based method. The proponents of this method before believe that the findings of phonetics should be applied to teaching and to teacher training, that the learners should hear the language first before seeing it in writing forms. For instance, after hearing a word from foreign language, it will be presented in sentences. Then sentences should be used and practiced in constructing meaningful and in different contexts. Example, the teacher would give the word mendicant. The word mendicant will then be explained by the teacher and used in a sentence. After that, students will give their own sentences using the word mendicant in different contexts. The teacher would say the word mendicant. Then he will explain this word as a person who lives by begging or simply means a beggar. Then the teacher would give his own sentence like, the mendicant in our street always begs me for some food. Then the teacher will ask his students to give their own examples. The students would say, the bypassers drop coins to the mendicant. Another student, the mendicants are sleeping on the streets. The mendicants are using rag clothes. In this way, students learn the language in a practical way. I believe everyone knows what the famous direct method is, right? In this method, language is taught from general to specific. For instance, the teacher might want to teach the basic sentence patterns. In teaching this topic using the direct method, the teacher will explain a pattern first before giving examples. Example: the teacher will explain first the pattern, that is SLVC. He will explain what is a subject, what is a linking verb, and what is a complement. That a subject is the one being talked about in the sentence. A linking verb is a verb that connects the subject and the complement, and a complement is a word that tells something about the subject. Example: the girl is pretty. The girl is the subject, is a linking verb that connects the subject to its complement, and the word pretty is a word that tells something about the girl. In this way, textbooks are replaced by the teachers because the teachers explain what is inside the book. In the direct method, pronunciation is given attention when speaking. Whenever a student mispronounces a word, the teacher then corrects his students directly. In teaching new vocabulary, known words or synonyms and antonyms can be used to explain the new word vocabulary. In this way, the students will easily grasp the meaning of the new vocabulary. In direct method, new vocabulary can also be taught using mime or demonstration and using pictures. The entry of the United States into World War II had a significant effect on the language teaching in America. Since United States has many allied forces from different countries, they must educate these countries how to use their language, and Americans must also know how to use other countries' language, so that they would have effective communication. Therefore, the American government commissioned all American universities to develop foreign language programs exclusively for military personnel. As a result of the commission, Army specialized training was made. In this program, the Army specialized training, the students, which are the members in the military, attained conversational proficiency in a variety of languages such as German, French, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Malay, and other languages. Even if the Army specialized training program only lasted for 2 years, it attracted attention in the popular press and in the academic community due to its oral-based approach. In 1939, Charles Fries, a trained structural linguist, speculated that grammar was a starting point. The structure of the language was identified with its basic sentence patterns and grammatical rules. Remember that we are talking about World War II, and it did not happen only for just a few years. It lasted for so many years. Meaning, since educational approach in language teaching has been changed, Charles Fries believed that the previous methods in the language teaching and learning, such as the grammar translation method, the reform movement, and the direct method, helped in the attainment in the effectivity of the audiolingual method because the learners maybe must have gotten at least little background knowledge about learning the target language. In audiolingual method, an intensive oral-based approach was used in which systematic attention to pronunciation was given importance. Intensive oral drilling was practiced and pattern practice was a classroom technique. In the intensive oral drilling and pattern practice, the students were given lots of drills wherein they must use the language. For instance, an incomplete sentence will be given to the students that will serve as their pattern. Then, they will have to construct their own sentences completing the incomplete sentence. The sentence given is, on Monday, I will, and then the student would then say, on Monday, I will report to my officer about the incident. Another example, on Monday, I will train my new members new techniques in combating. Another student would answer, on Monday, I will be resigning from my position. In the audiolingual methods, students are trained to focus on their speech, how they would respond to a given question, like how are you today, what are your future plans, how will you introduce yourself to a stranger, and how they will deliver their speech with the right pronunciation and intonation. Next approach in applied linguistics, which we can utilize in our classroom teaching practice, is behaviorism. We know that this is the study of human behavior, that as human beings, we are capable to store behaviors that somehow we copied or observed from other people, in which these behaviors, when we apply it, it becomes skills. In this approach, it tells that the occurrence of behaviors depends on three crucial elements in learning, which were popularized by the famous B.F. Skinner. First is stimulus that serves to elicit behavior. Second, response, which is triggered by the stimulus. And reinforcement that serves to mark the response as being appropriate and encourages the repetition of the response in the future. For instance, a child usually notices that when somebody greets his mom, "Hello, how are you?" His mom would always say, "Hello, I'm fine. Thank you. How about you?" So, when somebody also greets him, "Hello, how are you?" he will then say the same. "Hello, I'm fine. Thank you. How about you?" He will repeat the same response every time someone greets him, "Hello, how are you?" This next approach, the decline of audiolingual method, was rejected by a linguist named Chomsky. He believed that language is not built from habit structure and copied behavior. He believed that children can learn a language because they have their own capability to learn and acquire a language, which he called as learner's underlying competence. That this underlying competence is triggered and can be further developed as long as the learners can accept innovation and formation of new patterns. Example, the sentence, "I'm fine," can be said in many different ways, like "I'm good," "I'm okay," "I'm awesome." In CLT or communicative language competence, the focus of the learning principle is the communication principle, meaning communication competency is highly emphasized in learning a language. In this approach, to achieve communicative competence, activities that involve real learning are given to the students. That students are not just inside a classroom, that classrooms do not serve only as laboratory of experiments of learning, but viewed as the real world, where teachers bring in the classrooms the real situations that the students may encounter from the outside world, so that the students shall know how to face these situations using the target language. In communicative language competence, the more the language activities are related to their real-life experiences, the more it supports their learning process. Our present curriculum, which is K-12, applies this approach, the CLT. That is why, if you would notice, the competencies we follow that are stipulated in our curriculum guide encourage community involvement from the students. In this approach, Krashen believed that acquisition is different from learning, that a child can acquire knowledge or even a language if he is constantly exposed to it and incorporate it in the storage of language in his brain. Meaning, a child can acquire a knowledge or a language because he unconsciously develops the target language in his brain. However, a child learns a language or a knowledge if someone taught him about it, meaning he becomes conscious about the rules of grammar that represents a language because someone taught him the rules. Therefore, Prussian believed that the basic process involved in developing a language is by acquiring it, but with only little help from learning it. These are the approaches that we can use in our teaching practice in our stations. I hope, somehow, It refreshes our knowledge about approaches in teaching language. I also hope that this would help us to help our learners to easily learn the language and address their learning problems. These are the references I used for applied linguistics. Let me discuss computational linguistics. To view my presentation about computational linguistics, kindly click the link provided in the description or in the comment section below.